were killed at Gettysburg. And there's a marker to him just south of Culp along the Baltimore Pike. Miss Anna Caskey Sandow and George Washington Sandow recently married. And he is buried at Mount Joy Lutheran Church Cemetery. Some of you know Deborah Sandow McCausland. Okay, she's in direct relation of this family and this gentleman who was killed on June 26th in the initial clash with Jubilee troops entering Gettysburg. This is the view that members of Pike's Comanches had when they spotted Private Sandow along the Baltimore Pike. Culp's Hill is to the left. Spangler Meadows in the foreground. Wolf Hill's in the back. This is McAllister. This is actually McAllister Ridge here. So that view was had 5 days before the battle. And we're going to see how all these pieces come together as the Confederates were gradually gathering information about Culp's Hill. This is a modern view of the same area. Thanks to recent tree clearing within the last 15 years, you now have that view. You can stand along the Baltimore Pike, not far from where we are. And you can see Spangler Meadow, Culp's Hill, Wolf Hill, and then this is McAllister Ridge. This was my attempt to do a pan-out. I stood out there with a camera, and it's sort of, the proportions are a little bit off, but it gives you an idea of the area. This is the Nathaniel Lightner farm along the Baltimore Pike. You and I are right over here. We're in the visitor center, so it's not far from us. Nathaniel Lightner farm, and this is Powers Hill, and then you can see elements here of Wolf Hill. Again, the proportions are off because of my attempt at the pan-out. And then this is Lightner Ridge. It could also be called McAllister Ridge. Scouting party sent to Culp's Hill evening of July 1st. The Confederate scouting party ascended Culp's Hill after dark on July 1. As we continue to talk about intelligence gathering, the Southerners knew what they were getting into when they attacked Culp's Hill. There's this long, steady stream we're looking at of intelligence gathering. Confederate scouting party to Culp's Hill. Now, on the ORs, Richard Ewell, who commanded 1/3 of Robert E. Lee's Southern Army here, and whose troops faced Culp's Hill and Cemetery Hill, wrote in his after-action report, Cemetery Hill was not assailable from the town. It's because the streets were so narrow. Long before the automobile, it was a walking city. Streets were narrow. That's why you have one-way streets, because they were originally not designed with the automobile in mind. Gettysburg's the same way. Very narrow streets. You can't form lines of battle in the town. And if you fire artillery into the town, if you're the Union Army and you're firing artillery off Cemetery Hill down into the town, the buildings break up the fire. So the Confederates could anchor into cellars and attics and lodge in the town where they would stay for better part of 2 days. So Ewell knew that Union guns on Cemetery Hill were frowning down in the town. He couldn't form the lines of battle in the narrow streets. And that's what he's talking about. Cemetery Hill was not assailable from the town. By the way, the reason Pickett's charge occurred where it did, it was the only place to get at Cemetery Hill without having to go through the town. That's why Pickett's charge came in at the oblique, reverse direction. Cemetery Hill was not assailable from the town, and I determined with Johnson's division to take possession of a wooded hill. What's wooded hill? The Southerners call Culp's Hill a wooded hill. To my left, and on a line with and commanding Cemetery Hill. That's why the Southerners attacked Culp's Hill for 2 days, for 12 hours. Second longest fighting of the war, second only to the Muleshoe, in 4 years of war. The second longest period of time, ammunition used, energy levels used, manpower used, over the same bit of ground, locked for 12 and a half hours. So Pickett's charge was 45 minutes. Devil's Den, maybe 2 hours. Little Round Top, 2.5 hours. Culp's Hill was 12 and a half hours. 12 and a half hours. And the only reason the Confederates attacked Culp's Hill is they felt like it was, well, let's say the tactical reason, was it was it made Cemetery Hill unattainable. So that's the importance of it in the broader scheme. And we could go more into that, I'm tempted to, but we got to keep moving here. Before Johnson got up, the enemy was reported moving to outflank our extreme left. And I could see what seemed to be skirmishers in that direction. That's Ruger's brigade, Thomas Ruger's brigade, 13th New Jersey, 27th Indiana, 2nd Massachusetts, 3rd Wisconsin, 107th New York. It wore a red star on the hat. 1st Division, 12th Corps, marched from Littlestown to Two Taverns to Gettysburg in one day to come up on the 11th Corps right. And they marched up Benner's Hill and what would later be called Hospital Hill to threaten Ewell's flank. That was the primary reason why the Confederate pursuit of the Union 11th Corps through the town of Cemetery Hill stopped, because the 12th Corps showed up on their flank. And Ewell tells us that he watched the 49th Virginia Company D and White's Comanches skirmish with them. He's telling you that right here. That's why the Confederates didn't attack Cemetery Hill. The 12th Corps showed up on their left flank and gave the impression of a much larger force. Before this report could be investigated by Lieutenant T.T. Turner, notice that name, aide-de-camp of my staff, and Lieutenant Robert D. Early, sent for that purpose, and Johnson placed a position. The night was far advanced. And then he goes on to tell you that I received orders soon after dark to draw my corps to the right, in case it could not be used to avenge where it was. But the commanding general, that's Lee, thought the nature of the ground, the position for attack, was a good one on that side. I represented to the commanding general that the hill above referred to was unoccupied by the enemy. That's Culp's Hill. By the enemy, as reported by Lieutenants Turner and Early. And he tells you there that both of these officers had gone up upon it. So I don't know if you knew this, but Southerners actually were on top of Culp's Hill the evening of the 2nd, just like Samuel Johnston claimed to have been up on Little Round Top on July 2nd on behalf of the Confederates in their scouting before attacking the Union left in Round Top, Sweetfield, Keith Georgia. In the same way, Robert Early and Turner told Ewell that they made it on top of Culp's Hill, and that it commanded that position, that Cemetery Hill, and made Cemetery Hill untenable so far as I could judge. Then he goes on to say that General Johnson, this is Edward Allegheny Johnson, stated in reply to this order that after forming his line of battle, this side of the wooded hill in question, that's Culp's Hill, Johnson commanded about 6,000 troops. They made a forced march to get to Gettysburg to be in preparation to attack Culp's Hill. The reason why General Lee told Ewell to seize the heights south of town, if practicable, without bringing on a general engagement. That's where people usually prop off the order. But the rest of the order says, or until reinforcements arrive. Ewell decided to wait for Johnson to arrive. Johnson had to get around wagon trains on the Chambersburg Pike. He dropped into an unfinished railroad cut at 7 Stars. Local people said, we do that all the time to avoid paying the toll. Followed the railroad cut and got around A.P. Hill's wagon trains where the traffic jams were between here and Cashtown along the Chambersburg Pike. Climbed up out of the cut on McPherson Ridge on the first day's battlefield. And then followed the rail line on around to Benner's Hill, east of Gettysburg. So Johnson says once he got into position, then that meant Ewell could continue the attack. In those days, they didn't have daylight saving time. It was dark at 7 o'clock. Johnson got here, even with his innovative dropping in a cut and bypassing traffic. He still didn't get opposite Culp's Hill, a little place called Benner's Hill, in preparation to attack until around 7 p.m. But Johnson stated that after forming his line of battle, this side of Wooded Hill in question, that would be on Benner's Hill, facing Culp's Hill, he sent a reconnoitering party to Culp's Hill with orders to report as to the position of the enemy in reference to it. This party, on nearing the summit, was met by a superior force of the enemy, which succeeded in capturing a portion of the reconnoitering party, the rest of it making its escape. So Johnson made a follow-up reconnaissance In addition to Early and Turner being up there, probably around 5 p.m., closer to 7 p.m., Johnson sent these 20-plus scouts to the top of Culp Hill. They got up there, and the 7th Indiana Cutler's Brigade was there and captured probably 20 of them, maybe 2 or 3 escaped. And like taking a log flume at Hershey Park, the Confederates slid down, the 3 that escaped, 2, 3 that escaped, slid down the north face of Culp Hill and ran back in the direction of Benner's Hill to report that the area was occupied. The reason why the Confederates didn't attack Culp Hill before dark is this scouting mission revealed that it was occupied. You would say, well, it's only the 7th Indiana. Well, in the dark, instead of 700 men, it might as well be 7,000 men. It's occupied. So well, there are factors as to why the rebels didn't attack that night. It has to do with reconnaissance, and hopefully this is beneficial to you in that way. During the conversation with General Johnson, it says, one man arrived bringing a dispatch. This is one of the men that escaped from Culp Hill, dated at 12 midnight, and taken from a Federal courier, making his way from General Sykes to General Slocum, which the former, that Sykes, stated his corps was then halted 4 miles from Gettysburg, and he would resume his march at 4 a.m. Lieutenant Turner brought this dispatch to that's Ewell's headquarters, and at the same time stated that General Johnson would refrain from attacking Culp Hill until I had received notice of the fact that the enemy, that's the 7th Indiana and the Iron Brigade, were in possession of the hill and had sent him further orders. So all of this information was processed. That's why Ewell didn't attack the hill. Notice, too, the part that I've highlighted in green. This tells you that the 2 or 3 men that escaped from being captured by the 7th Indiana on Culp Hill, on their way back to Benner's Hill, they ran into a Union courier. This is the danger of having a large staff now. And he had papers on him from Sykes, the 5th Corps commander, commanding 10,000 troops. They had marched 58 miles in 3 days from Frederick to get there. And they were coming up on the Union right flank near Culp Hill. They were only 4 miles from there, a place called Bonneville today. They called it Bonnetown back then. And I'm sure Ewell felt tingles up his spine when he read that not only was Culp Hill occupied, but the 2 or 3 men that escaped ran into a courier representing Sykes with papers to give to Slocum, the right-wing commander, announcing that 10,000 Union troops, the 5th Corps, was only 4 miles from the battlefield. That would also mean that Jeb Stuart's cavalry wasn't protecting the flank. So that's all the more reason not to attack Culp Hill. There's a lot of information being gathered here, including the Southerners actually being on the hill twice the evening of the 1st. And these are markers of nearby 2nd Wisconsin Infantry entrenchments, approximately 100 yards from where much of Johnson's scouting party was captured. This is an Edwin Forbes sketch of the main fortifications along the eastern slope, built by Green's Brigade. This is the 7th Indiana Infantry Monument. Johnson's scouting party was discovered here after dark on July 1st by the 7th Indiana Infantry. So they're very instrumental, the 7th Indiana, in preventing the rebels from attacking Culp Hill the night of the 1st. As we continue to look at intelligence gathering, Lee personally surveyed the Union right in an aerial way. My son's studying, he's studying aeronautics now, and he has his drone's license, working on his pilot's license. So proud of him, proud of the fact he flew this morning to Harrisburg International Airport. He's actually here with us today. And he and I have talked about the importance of surveillance in modern times with drones. And, cameras in buildings and satellite imagery. It's amazing the three-dimensional warfare that we have today, and or intelligence gathering via satellite, via GPS, via cams and the like. The equivalent in the Civil War times was to send up a hydrogen balloon or to climb a tower. And so the equivalent of a drone back then would be find the nearest steeple or the nearest cupola and just go up it. And so we have from Isaac Trimble an account of Lee surveying the Union right, the Culpsville area, in a drone-like fashion. And this is also good information about the argument over whether Lee's health prevented him from getting around. Clearly, he's climbed a tower to be able to look down on the Culpsville area. His heart couldn't have been too bad if he was able to do that. July 2nd, this morning, all was quiet. General Lee, about 9 a.m., said Trimble, rode over to General Ewell's quarters, who was absent. That's Lee, first met me and said he wanted to go to some point which would command a view of the country and the enemy position. That would be like my son sitting up a drone. I pointed out the cupola of the almshouse nearby, to which we ascended. From this, we had a good view of Cemetery Hill, Round Top, Culpsville, and adjacent country. So we would have taken field glasses, we would call them binoculars, and climbed the tower. Culpsville straight ahead, taken from Benner's Hill. This is a photograph I took, comparable to Lee's cupola view. You can see Culpsville there from Benner's Hill, where Johnson's troops would eventually attack from towards Culpsville. There's Culpsville again in the background, and in the foreground you can see the dismantled fence posts along the Baltimore Pike Union level corps used to lace their lunettes and their fortifications that they built on Cemetery Hill. You get fiber to their fortifications. They dismantled all the fences along the Baltimore Pike. That's East Cemetery Hill in the foreground. White's Comanches returned to examine Culpsville's environs on July 2nd. After White's Comanches damaged portions of the Hanover-Gettysburg Railroad toward York between June 26 and June 28, they returned to Gettysburg to guard Ewell's left flank on July 1 and 2. They were ordered to reconnoiter, that is, to scout the Union right around Culpsville on the morning of July 2nd. Author Captain Frank Myers, Company A, 35th Battalion, Virginia Cavalry, White's Comanches, wrote a book after the war, Regimental History of the 35th, and the things that they did around Culpsville. There's a lot of talk about Lee not having cavalry and so forth. Lee did have the 35th Virginia Cavalry scoping the Union right flank from June 26th up through the morning of July 2nd. Myers describes an expedition that he and one other officer led to the environs of Culpsville on July 2nd. So not only did Confederates go to the top of Culpsville the evening of July 1st twice, but then White's Comanches were sent there again on the morning of the 2nd before they even attacked. Company E, White's Comanches, this is a picture taken in 1894. Captain Frank Myers does not appear in this photo, possibly because he served in Companies A and E and identified with both. This is a photograph from our museum. If you walk through the museum, you will see this photograph. And the Hanover Road, along with access farm lanes and field roads to Culpsville and Baltimore Pike are shown in this map. The area was patrolled by White's Comanches. Remember I said at the beginning, this part of the battlefield is more complex? It is. And if you hadn't spent time in this part of the battlefield, your eyes could glaze over, you could get lost, or you might just be incredibly intrigued, or a seed might be planted and you return back to the story later. But you can spend years studying these areas that most people never visit. And White's Comanches would scour these areas. This is the Hanover Road, and we're going to visit some places you may never have visited before. The Lady Farm, the Brinkerhoff Farm. This would be the area of the, I don't have it marked, but the Storick Farm, and then the 3rd Pennsylvania Heavy Artillery, all along the Hanover Road. This is the Wolf Hill. It was a huge, almost like a Great Wall of China on that part of the battlefield east of Gettysburg. The reason why there were cavalry battles east of Gettysburg, East Cavalry Field, for instance, Brinkerhoff Ridge, is largely in part because of this wall known as Wolf Hill, double layered by Brinkerhoff Ridge, which secluded and made almost like an island east of town, that part of the battlefield, meaning cavalry had to operate east of Wolf Hill at all times so there wouldn't be blindside accesses to the Army's flanks. So that's why cavalry battles would occur out in this area. Also, there was railroad repair going on, and so Union cavalry had to protect and cover the rail repair that was going on behind lines. There were 400 Union workers repairing rail lines that the Southerners had damaged. White Comanches had damaged the Hanover-Gettysburg line. And so that repair was going on, and those engineers were working to try to make hardwired links to the battlefield so the Union Army could bring up horses and shoes and supplies, medical supplies. So that was another reason for so much movement with Union cavalry east of Gettysburg. But so let's visit these places then. I want you to also notice, and it's beyond my scope today, but I want you to notice Rock Creek. Every battlefield has a major water source: Antietam Creek, Bull Run, Wilson's Creek, Chickamauga. Gettysburg had Rock Creek. It defined the battlefield as much as Cemetery Ridge did. It's not a coincidence that the two are parallel and just a few miles apart. This is the Lady Farm as we go along the Hanover Road, part of where Vice Comanches patrolled, gathered information. This is the Brinkerhoff house. It's lived in by Gloria Ann Hutchison, and her son Rick Hutchison lives nearby. If you go out to visit these places, these folks that live there, they're salt of the earth people, and you want to get to know them. Where is Larry and Annette in the group here? Okay, yeah, and Keener Farley. They are on the board of the Lady Farm, the Gettysburg Battlefield Preservation Association. So you want to work through them if you want to go visit the Lady Farm. The Brinkerhoff house, you want to talk to the Hutchisons. I can tell you how to get in contact with them. The Historic House is a historic house. He was one of the superintendents of the battlefield in the 1930s, and he was a licensed guy, just an early shaper of the story of the Battle of Gettysburg. He was also a school teacher, and the Historic House is owned today by the Crane family. Here's another overview again, just to bring you back for orientation. You have the Lady Farm. We just saw the Brinkerhoff Farm. The Historic Farm's right in here. We haven't gotten to the 3rd Heavy Artillery, but it's out here. Also, we're going to begin to look at some of these roads here, like Highland Avenue Road. These are lesser known roads on the battlefield. White Run Road. The whole 5th Corps marched to Gettysburg on this road. White Run Road. This is Low Dutch Road. And out of your view, Two Taverns Road. Very important roads. The reason why Union Cavalry, an entire division, was in that area on July 2nd and 3rd is because they discovered the Confederate cavalry scouring that area, trying to find ways to their wagon trains and ways to attack Culp. And it led to an entire division of Union cavalry being there to clog access lanes to the Baltimore Pike and the wagon train, and much more. And you did the early tripwire alarm systems to an attack on Culp. The Union was just as active on the other side. We do another program just as involved on Union intelligence. They were doing counterintelligence all during the fight. This is Brinkerhoff Ridge looking west. 35th was there. Brinkerhoff Ridge looking east. The 10th New York Cavalry marker is in the upper right corner of the screen. You can visit that today. And they were from Buffalo, New York. Bob, they were from Buffalo. And this part of the tour also, as I'm doing like a visual tour here, is just to show you parts of the battlefield you may or may not have seen. There's the 10th New York Cavalry marker up close. They would fight at Brinkerhoff Ridge along with the 3rd Pennsylvania Cavalry and the 1st New Jersey and Purnell's Maryland Legion against the 2nd Virginia, Stonewall's Brigade, Virginia Brigade. This is a marker out on Hoffman Road, just off of Hanover Road. And it's an area where there's a marker talking about the cavalry fight at Brinkerhoff Ridge on July the 2nd. And by the way, to understand why the cavalry battle occurred in East Cavalry Field, you have to understand Brinkerhoff Ridge. The reason why there was a fight at East Cavalry Field on July 3rd was the Southerners were trying to flank Benner's Field, so it led them on a wider arc further east of Gettysburg. Brinkerhoff Ridge was a prelude to that. This is the E. Deerdorf house. It still stands. I heard it was for sale. And that's all along the area that I was showing you, mainly E. Deerdorf Lane. The E. Deerdorf barn. The foundation parts of it may be original. The 2nd Virginia skirmished there early in the morning against the 27th Indiana. This is east of Wolf Hill on July 2nd. Confederates were very active over there gathering information, and the Union was very active keeping them at bay. This is the E. Deerdorf barn. Wesley Culp may have skirmished here on July 2nd. Sue Boardman, one of her theories on where Wesley Culp was killed was on the Deerdorf farm, skirmishing the morning of the 2nd. This is E. Deerdorf Lane, what's left of it. Route 15 has cut through this part of the battlefield and halved it and separated it. There's the 16th Pennsylvania Cavalry. They would be stationed on E. Deerdorf Lane on July 3rd. The 9th Massachusetts Infantry was Schweitzer's Brigade under Colonel Guinea was stationed there on July 2nd. So they missed the fighting in the wheat field because they were guarding the same area that the 16th Pennsylvania would guard on the 3rd. It's a strategic access point through Wolf Hill to the rebel flank at Benner's Hill. There's Wolf Hill in the background from the 16th Pennsylvania Cavalry marker. Now, Captain Frank Myers would write his account about how he reconnoitered, how he scouted, how he gathered information on July 2nd before the attack there. And he says, at dark, the troops encamped, and in the morning, the battalion, that's 35th Virginia Battalion, was broken up into scouting parties for the generals of the left wing. That would be Ewell and Johnson early. The colonel, that's White, sending Captain Myers and Grub with 6 men each to find the right flank. That's Culp's Hill of the Yankees. They crossed the creek, that's Rock Creek, and separating, scouted through rough, broken country for probably 2 hours, when they united exactly in rear of the enemy's right wing and sent a courier to inform Colonel White's Comanches that they had found it. Myers, who wrote this account, said, having gone around the right flank while Grub passed through an opening in the Union line without knowing it until he found himself in the Union rear. Here, that's Myers and Grub, saw a long train of Union wagons and determined to capture some of them. But on arriving, about 200 yards of the train, found that a cavalry force had passed along in the rear. That's a Union cavalry force. I'll identify them in a minute. While a line of infantry was marching directly towards them. From this interesting situation, they agreed to retire without wagons. That's his humor. If they could. It was a particular business, but by passing off for Yankee scouts, which Captain Grub could be duped to perfection, they got clear of taking 5 prisoners with them. Now, some of you have been with me on the Samuel Johnson's reconnaissance of the Round Tops on July 2nd. They did something, the Southerners did something similar on the other flank. And Johnston, in scouting Round Top, said he only had about 5 men with him. And if you were with me on that walk, you may remember, just blurt out if you remember, why would you only take a small group of 5 or 6 men to do a scouting mission? Yeah, let's say you were to go in with 1,000 cavalrymen. Why would that not be a good idea? Yeah, the Union signal station on Powers Hill, Cemetery Hill, they would easily spot you through field glasses and what we would call telescope. A couple miles away, they would know you were coming. So if you can get in closer and see without being seen in smaller groups. And like Samuel Johnston, who said that the goal of a scout is to see without being seen, he wouldn't have worn epaulets and things that would have given him away and made him an easy capture. Like the FBI and Homeland Security and CIA, they just sort of blend in with everybody. And so that's what Grub had learned to do. Whether he put on a straw hat to look like local civilians, or whether he put on a Union coat, he fooled some people on the Union side and captured them. And then they would question them. So they're gathering information. That's our focus here. White's Comanches split into two scouting parties of 6, taking from Captain Frank Myers, Companies A and E, and Captain R.B. Grub's Company C to investigate the environment of the Culp. So this is all on the 2nd now before they even attack there. And routes were taken by White's Comanches in 2 parties of 6. The route divides in several places. Just briefly, you can see the Union line here. Here's Culp's Hill. Here's the E. Deardor Farm. This is Highland Avenue Road, Clap Saddle Road. Some just salt-of-the-earth people live in this area today. Bruce Stairs, Steve Kelly, Dean Schultz. How many of you know these fine people? Okay, so you want to work with them if you ever visit those areas. And Dean has gone out of his way, he and Judy Schultz, to buy up more and more land and put permanent scenic easements on there so that it'll never be developed. He's just doing incredible things over there. He took the volunteers and myself around there this past summer. He owns that land all around Lost Avenue. So this is the route, Clap Saddle Road, likely taken by Grub. And then Myers likely went around the outside and reached the Baltimore Pike. And they unified somewhere here. Powers Hill's right here, Callister Hill here, the old miniature golf course right here today. Battlefield Trust now owns it. And here's, Myers called it rough, broken country. You can definitely see why. That's what Wolf Hill looks like. Neal Avenue or Lost Avenue, carved through Wolf Hill down to the footbridge. That's probably the route taken by Grub's 6 men on horseback. There's the old McAllister Mill footbridge, as it looked in 1900 anyway. And Rock Creek near the footbridge is where 1 or more parties of 6 cavalry then crossed along Rock Creek. Probably Grub crossed here. His horses would have had to very carefully go across. This is the Rock Creek Bridge along the Baltimore Pike. It's the only road bridge crossing of Rock Creek where cavalry could remain mounted and avoid deep water around the dams. That is, Grub took the inside route, more direct, Clap Saddle Road, whereas Myers took the outside route, and that allowed him to stay east of Rock Creek and never have to cross it until he reached the Rock Creek modern bridge there today. The Baker Farm is there today. That's where Dean and Judy Schultz live. And that's an important intersection, by the way. Later on, Union infantry would be placed there because it was a way for the rebels to get around the Union right flank without having to cross Rock Creek. Called Highland Avenue Road. This is Spangler Meadow. Now going back to this account of Frank Myers, notice that a Union, I've highlighted this and I've underlined it, notice that a Union cavalry force had passed along in their rear, and a line of infantry, Union infantry, marching directly towards them. Union cavalry referred to here was likely one of 2 companies of Buford's division, probably Company F of the 17th Pennsylvania. If you take the guide exam, you know this, one of the things that helps or hurts you when you take the guide exam, the oral part of it is, if you introduce someone into the story on your oral exam on the first day of the battle, you need to know where they were on the 2nd and 3rd day of the battle. They can't disappear. So if you know Buford fought on the first day west of Gettysburg, and you know that extensively, you need to know that they guarded the peach orchard on the 2nd day, and that they guarded the area near that footbridge, near the McAllister Dam at Rock Creek on July 2nd, that they escorted in the 5th Corps after their 58-mile march from Frederick along the Hanover Road. That's Joshua Chamberlain, everybody say, guided them onto the battle. That was Buford. And then you need to know Buford went to Taneytown, evening of the 2nd, and then he was in Westminster guarding 4,000 tons of medical and food supplies via the Western Maryland Railroad on July 3rd. So, and again, he can't fall off a cliff after July 1. You need to know where they go. And so that's probably Company F, 17th Pennsylvania Cavalry, that Grub and Myers ran into. And the Union infantry they ran into that caused them to skedaddle was probably George Sears Green's New York Brigade, marching from the Round Tops to Culp Hill. They had been over in front of the Round Tops at the end of the 1st, backing up people there, and then they marched over after 3 a.m. to the right flank. This is a Jedediah Hotchkiss map, very rare map. Chuck Teague got this map for me once. He went down to the National Archives. He said, "Here, friend," he gave me a copy of it, and I have it framed in my office. But it shows a frozen moment in time from the rebel information gathering, intelligence gathering of the Union right flank. A moment in time from the evening of July 1st to around noon on July 2nd. Notice in the area of the peach orchard over here on your left, notice there's no intelligence over here. Notice that. Hotchkiss, who was the map maker for Ewell's Corps, has no awareness of anything in the way of signals over here at this point. Proctor Smith and Samuel Johnston would do that intelligence gathering. And Hotchkiss at this point in time, when he did this map by noon on July 2nd, did not have that information of the Union left in front of the Round Top. Notice Gregg's division of cavalry clogging all the access routes to the Baltimore Pike. The wagon trains, notice them right here. Isn't that incredible? Why do we have a wagon train on a rebel map? Because they knew the wagon trains were there. How did they know they were there? Because Grub and Myers made it there. Okay? And so they got to this point before Greene and the 17th Pennsylvania Cavalry shooed them away. Myers remembered a long train of wagons. These are ambulances at City Point near Richmond in 1863. He saw a long train of wagons. There were 3,000 Union ambulances at Gettysburg, 300 artillery pieces, 300 at least additional ammunition and logistical wagons at Gettysburg. This image, get ready for this now. This image is of 300 Union wagons at Brandy Station, Virginia. 300. The Union Army had 3,000 ambulances alone near Powers Hill, about a mile south of here. Not 300 as is pictured. Try to times that by 10, and that's what Grub and Myers ran into. There's an old expression, experts study logistics, and amateurs study tactics. This is logistics. This is major. No wonder the Baltimore Pike, why the Culp was so important. This is what it protected. If that line had broken at any point, this is tragic, but the Confederates could have come in. You wound the lead horse, you fired their lead horse. Grub or Myers could have done this. Stewart's cavalry could have done this on July 3rd, having made it to Baltimore Pike. There's 6 horses and mules per wheel vehicle, 38,000 Union horses and mules, conservative estimates, with all the wagon trains there. Between there and Union Mills, 14 miles south, and then beyond there, 18 miles south of Gettysburg. And you reach those cavalry, reach those wagon trains, you fire upon and wound the lead horse. The other 5 horses won't work in unison with a wounded horse. That means that wagon train is disabled. And then you set fire to the wagon. It could have been a disaster had Culp fallen. The rebels would have just done limited damage to each wagon and created traffic jams and panics behind the lines. This is what Grub and Myers ran into. 10 times the number that you see there, just for the ambulances. This is a William Payne map. This is from our museum here. I took a photograph in there. William Payne map. He was Meade's staff cartographer. He was very much like what Hotchkiss was for the rebels. And this is a map he did on July 2nd, evolving from 4 a.m. to 2 p.m. in concert with General Meade, commanding General's orders. Notice Union cavalry at the footbridge across Rock Creek. That's probably Company F, 17th Pennsylvania Cavalry. The Union not only placed 17th PA Cav there after Grub and Myers crossed in the area, and we're not going to let them cross again, but then they placed eventually, some of you know that Greene's brigade was placed there on the evening of July 2nd. He supposedly got lost. And then on July 3rd, Thomas Neal's brigade, Lost Avenue, was placed there. That's a strategic point. It gives access to the Baltimore Pike for the Southerners who would not have to cross Rock Creek until they reached the Pike and got to the bridge. This map was distributed to Captain Wilcox, 1st Corps Major General John Reynolds. It is a colorized facsimile of the William Payne map authorized by Meade to be distributed to the Federal Corps on July 2nd. Again, notice Union cavalry at the footbridge were probably Grub crossed, and where he met up with Myers. The Federal cavalry guarded Federal trains along the Baltimore Pike south of Rock Creek. Okay. Now, last portion of the program. How are we doing with filming and the broadcast? Okay. Do we have another 10 minutes? Do we have 10 minutes? Okay, I'll do it in 10 minutes then. Johnson's skirmishers gathered intelligence from Culp. This is the last aspect of gathering information. Finally, Southerners gathered essential information from Major General Edward Allegheny Johnson's skirmish line in front of Culp. 25th, 5th, and 2nd Virginia skirmish across Rock Creek, gathering information about the strength, location, and morale of the Federal position at Culp. What do we mean about morale? They used to play sports, played high school basketball, high school football. Bob can certainly relate to this being a high school official. And you say, well, how do you determine your opponent's morale? There are times when you go in a game, in the first few minutes, you run back to the sideline from the field or from the court, and you get in a huddle, and you tell the coach, they don't want to be here. They don't want to be here. You know, the other team doesn't want to be here. You know, be more assertive. They don't want to be here. You can end this game in the first quarter if you really press that. So skirmishers are out there to determine enemy's location. You want to know where they are before you attack. Their morale, if they're ready to fight, that's easy to learn. And then their strength, the numbers, so that you can attack with comparable numbers. So the 25th, 5th, and 2nd Virginia did that in front of Culp. Union skirmishers crossed Rock Creek to engage the 25th and 5th. Specifically, there were 300 Union skirmishers of the 28th Pennsylvania from the Pittsburgh area. And this was all going on at the base of Culp Hill hours before the attack on July 2nd. This is a panorama of Wolf Hill on the left. It's my favorite view in the park. McAllister Hill, Powers Hill, and Culp Hill. This is from Benner's Hill, where Johnson's troops would attack. Johnson's troops would attack on the 2nd, with George Maryland Stewart's troops on the left. Williams, Louisianans in the center. And over on the far right, Jones, Virginians. That's on July 2nd. Now look at the reports here. I want you to see the information gathering. I don't want to lose our focus here. What does Johnson's report tell us? The rebel commander's report. That the skirmishers were doing what? Ascertained, reported, information, communicated, received information. Skirmishing is less about rifle fire, more about gathering information. Wolf Hill from Benner's Hill. Okay? Let's just go over to Wolf Hill and let's climb it with the 2nd and 5th Virginia. There's John Popel on the far left. How many of you know John Popel? He's one of the volunteers in the park. He and I went over there with Craig Cava and some other folks, and the Nagels who live over in that area, Sandy Nagel's husband took us up there, and they owned the Rosensteel farm in Wolf Hill. And they took us up there, and we walked Wolf Hill. Most people never make it up there. Again, look at Jones' report. He commanded 1/3 of Johnson's attack. And he says, we watched the motions of the enemy. So they got down close enough to Culp so they could watch the motion. Gathering information. Maryland Stewart writes in his report, he commanded Marylanders, North Carolinians, and Virginians 300 yards in front of our line. Enemy was strongly entrenched. The Southerners knew the Union was entrenched on Culp Hill. That was not a surprise. Why? Because skirmishers found out this information. Taking some few prisoners, says Colonel Nadenbosch. Well, when you capture a prisoner, you ask questions. Colonel Funk of the 5th Virginia said that we moved in the direction of Wolf Mountain. He also called it Red Hill, where the enemy had taken refuge. There's Wolf Mountain, where the 5th Virginia advanced to skirmish with the 9th Massachusetts there on picket duty. What a great view on Wolf Hill, looking from there 600 feet above sea level down towards Benner's Hill, where the rebels would attack from. This is the rough ground the 2nd Virginia skirmishers pushed through the night of July 1st to fill the vacuum between them and the 27th Indiana to ascertain Federal strength, location, and morale around Culp Hill. It's the night of the 1st. Look at this incredible view that we got from the top of Wolf Hill. There's the visitor center. And another view, and you can see Round Tops off to the left. Hill. This is interesting. This is Meade's addendum report. The commanding general of the Union Army wrote an addendum report in addition to his original report on February 25th, 1864 to Henry Halleck, requesting, it's all related to an update on Thomas Ruger's report. And herein Meade, watch this is incredible information. Herein Meade credited the timing of Confederate Commander Johnson's July 2nd attack against Culp with preceding the withdrawal of our troops. That's what Meade wrote. Talk about gathering information. The enemy, preceding the withdrawal of our troops, advanced and attacked General Greene. That's Pat Greene. So the timing of the rebel attack on Culp was related to seeing 300 skirmishers of the 28th Pennsylvania suddenly withdraw from their front across Rock Creek. They had been told to look for an opportunity. Skirmishers are 1/10 of your force. So if you have 300 skirmishers, the rebels could do quick math. If the Union in the 28th Pennsylvania had 300 skirmishers, how many troops are they shielding and masking? 3,000. So you know that you don't know Candy and Payne brigades by name, but you know that 3,000 men are withdrawing from your front. Why? Because 300 skirmishers withdrew from your front. Where were they going? To help out Sickles on the far left. They never made it there, but they made it to that foot bridge. I don't think it's a coincidence. Union skirmishers at the base of Culp served an early warning signal that the main attack was approaching. That's, by the way, that's why the fight occurred where it did. The reason Pat Greene stayed and fought at Culp Hill, even though he was ordered to go over towards the Round Tops to help Sickles, is because his skirmishers, the 60th New York, and the 78th New York, 102nd New York, 137th New York, detected on their skirmish line Johnson's main body approaching and waiting across Rock Creek to attack. And Greene said to Geary, "Can I stay here?" And Geary said, "Yeah, he can stay here." And then Hancock started shifting troops over to 71st Pennsylvania. Soon the 106th Pennsylvania came over. They started moving furniture around to protect the hill from those that had vacated to help Sickles over on the other front. All right, this is our conclusion. Why did Lee assault Culp Hill? Attacking Culp Hill threatened the primary tactical objective of Cemetery Hill from the east, even as the main Confederate attacks up the Gettysburg Road pressured it from the west toward the pincer, the bend in the Fish on Cemetery Hill. Lee intended to critical mass from two directions on Cemetery Hill to force a Federal retreat south along the Baltimore Pike. Attacking Culp Hill also offered the equal advantage of fighting in the woods, an advantage for both armies toward sustained action. Why did the fighting on Culp Hill last 12 hours? Here's your answer. Clausewitz writes, "But we must not overlook the fact that a forest may hide the enemy. If we conceal ourselves in it, this disadvantage affects both sides." The reason why the Cemetery Ridge and Cemetery Hill were the main positions, you could see Pickett's charge a mile away. That's the position you want. You don't want foliage in front of you. You don't want your enemy to sneak up on you. Culp Hill had a lot of nooks and crannies and blindside accesses to the tops. And you had to use up a lot of men inefficiently to cover blindside access to the top of the hill. Remember, Jomini said, "Be wary of defending a wooded hill. You can be surrounded and not even know it." So Culp Hill, that's why the Southerners were able to ensconce behind rocks and trees and stay there for 12 hours. They could have only stayed 15 minutes within firing range of Pickett's charge. They could stay forever in Culp Hill and pressure the wagon trains in the Baltimore Pike and the way of escape. The Southern Army did indeed scout Culp Hill proper and the greater Union right flank. Information gathering began 5 months earlier when Hotchkiss first visited Gettysburg. Jubal Early and White's Comanches added to this knowledge on June 26th. And Lee climbed the almshouse cupola. These are all ways in review that we talked about in gathering information. On July 2nd, Southerners fine-tuned their information gathering to specific places such as Little Round Top and Culp Hill. Similar to Samuel Johnson's July 2nd morning reconnaissance along the Union left to Round Top, a committee of lesser-known scouts did the same from the evening of July 1 to the morning of July 2nd on and around Culp Hill. The committee included lesser-known participants of the battle, Lieutenant Turner, Early, that's Robert Early. Johnson sent a scouting party of 20 plus, most of them were captured. 2 or 3 escapees found that the 5th Corps was only 4 miles from the battlefield of Bonneville. This is all information gathering. in relation to our subject. Summary conclusion, although the Confederate commander, Edward Johnson, facing Culp Hill, although his scouting party determined that Lee would not attack Culp Hill on July 1, and it informed the location of unassailable approaches to Culp Hill that Johnson's division avoided on July 2nd. Why did the Southerners attack the more gentle slopes of Culp Hill and not the steep slopes? Why the eastern face and not the northern slopes? Their scouts learned where to attack and that information. That's why Johnson found where he was supposed to attack on July 2nd. Lastly, it revealed the Union 5th Corps resting on Mill's flank. And then we mentioned that both Myers and Grub reconnoitered Culp Hill on the morning of the 2nd. Finally, the Committee of Lesser-Known Information Gatherers included the 25th, 5th, and 2nd Virginia skirmishers who performed basic skirmish functions of determining Union strength and morale. That concludes Culp Hill intelligence gathering. Thank you for coming out. I'll go over to Culp Hill and Bender's Hill and walk the area.